Hi everyone, welcome to After Class.
A podcast by two passionate adult ballerinas about all things adult ballet related.
And some random thoughts in between.
We're so glad you're here.
So grab your water bottle
or a cup of coffee
and join us for a quick chat after class.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the After Class podcast. Today, we're going to talk about summer intensives. So specifically, how to prepare for them physically and how to care for our bodies during and after. Intensives are an awesome experience, but they're also very physically taxing. So this episode is going to be full of practical tips and information to help you feel your best and have the best possible experience. I am not going to be doing this episode alone. Yelena is actually still on maternity leave. She had her baby, which is awesome, and we miss her. But today I have a special guest who's going to help me with this episode. We have Allie Christensen on the podcast, who is the founder of Align Fitness and the Dancer Strong program. And she is a movement specialist and trainer who specializes in working with adult dancers to build strength and mobility and prevent injury so that we can experience our full potential in the studio. I've personally been working with Allie for the last few years, and she has helped me a ton. So I'm so excited to have her back on the podcast. Welcome, Allie.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be back. I had so much fun last time, so it was a heck yes. I'll come back anytime you want.
Yes, I know. I was like, yay, we get to have her back on, and so soon. As I was thinking about this topic, I was like, we have to have Allie on for this because you have so much experience in this area, teaching at adult intensives. You really understand what it's like from all sides, being there during the week, seeing what the adults are doing, teaching, and then also helping people get in their best physical shape to attend and then recover after. So you have a ton to offer this episode. I'm really excited to hear what you have to share with everyone. So I guess we could just kind of kick off, jump right in with, this is kind of a generalization question, but what kind of physical shape do you think people should be in for an intensive? I know this is a big one for adults that they maybe are like, I really want to go to intensive, but I have no idea how good of shape I should be in to be able to go and enjoy. So what would you kind of say to that question generally?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think every person is thinking it on some level and probably thinking I need to be in better shape than I am. I think that's pretty much the common thread for us. It's very specific for every individual dancer. So my advice throughout all this whole podcast is remember that every person is an individual and everybody has a different life story and circumstance and body history and availability to do different things. So remember that we're working from where we're at. And one of the big things I've realized in working specifically with adults is that we have to keep our goals in mind, bigger picture than what's coming up immediately. Like we're recording this in April and summer intensive season is upon us quite quickly here. So if you're going to be in an intensive this year, some of this advice may not actually really be able to like stick and be in you for this coming season, but it will be there if you did something in the fall and next year. And remember that if you're going to attend something and you don't feel as prepared as you would like to, there are ways to fully enjoy and take away everything you possibly can while still wanting or realizing that you could be in different shape next time you do this. So just keep that all in mind. But to answer the question as best that I can, I think that there's a few easy guidelines to think about as you're building up to this. I think that we should be able to take 2 to 3 dance classes in a day and be okay the next day. And that's not going to happen overnight. So that's something to build up for. And you do not have to take 2 to 3 dance classes every day. But you can kind of use that as a marker. So on a Saturday or Sunday, you're going to say, okay, here's that tester. I'm going to see if I can make it through a ballet class, a point class, and like choreography or something like that, because that's going to be very similar to your summer intensive schedule or your weekend intensive. On that note, the other aspect of that is that because we're dancing multiple days in a row, can you take class 3 days in a row and feel okay? So if you get to day 2 or 3 and your joints are hurting and things are just not, you don't feel like you can move through the soreness, which I'm sure is going to be a question later on, then we need to think about what we're doing leading up to it. Something I always use for dancers, because we're not all going to be able to take multiple classes a day. I can't take multiple classes in preparation for something like this, but what I can do is go on a bike ride with my kids, and then we go and jump in the ocean and we swim, and then I go back and take a dance class, and then I run over to the gym and I do my cardio or my weights. And in one day, I've done several hours of physical activity, and how do I feel? So you don't have to think of this like dance, dance, dance. Think of it as physical activity that's enjoyable, but also challenges your body, and you can involve your whole life, your whole family, your friends. You can plan a hiking day. You can decide you're going to go to the beach or the pool. So you can take advantage of what's there. It just doesn't have to all be hours in the studio, which is not practical for most of us.
I think that's a really good point. I like too that you addressed the amount of classes you're taking in a day and also multiple days in a row, because I almost feel like when I think about going to an intensive, it's like the days are sprints and the week is a marathon. You're
Totally.
having these days where you're like pushing, 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 and you're kind of going nonstop. And then the week itself, it's like, okay, sustaining that for, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. So it's kind of a both and of like, what can you handle in a day? And then what can you handle stacking multiple days on top of each other? So I think those are both really good things to consider. Hi friends, just wanted to remind you that thebusybunhead.com is now live, so make sure you head over and check that out. It is a hub for all things adult ballet. Right now we have published a list of all the adult ballet intensives happening in 2025, so make sure you go check out the website and find your next adult ballet intensive. So again, this is kind of a generalization, and we're going to be doing this in this episode because obviously we can't speak to every single person or situation, but what types of general conditioning do you recommend that adult dancers are focusing on in the lead up to an intensive? If they're going to just start incorporating some additional training, some additional time spent in getting their bodies ready, what types of things do you recommend?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I am a big fan of variety. I think that as dancers, well, I think in the dance world, we used to be just so specific. You have to have the hours in the studio to be a good dancer. But we've absolutely proven that to not be true, that more is not always better. In fact, most of the time it's not. And that variety of movement makes your body stronger and healthier for the sport that you choose to do, for us, the art form and sport that we choose to do. So if I have best case scenario, meaning my workshop is 1 year away or a little bit less, then I would tell my dancers to start really thinking and training for this thing about 6 months before. And in the beginning, if you're listening to this right as we release and you're going into this summer intensive season, that's just not going to be possible. But that 6 months before really gives you times to have the up and downs because they're going to happen. It's very natural. So we want to allow for enough time for that. I think that strength and the idea of getting stronger as your whole body will serve you very well. The focus in dance tends to be on flexibility. And there's been some really nice studies that I'm going to totally generalize here, but basically showed that after doing, say, passive stretches, so things that were like sitting in your splits or stretching your frog, after sitting in that, the ability for your muscle to refire up and have its full power, so like ability to jump or sprint or move you through the air, that lessened significantly. And it took 6 hours for that ability of the muscle to fully contract and like power you up through the air to come back. So when we overstretch and we're not meeting it with strength, we're taking away our ability to actually dance, because it's more strength and flexibility to be a dancer, to be able to stand up on your leg, to extend your leg in the air, to do a pirouette. These are more strength movements. So I think that we focus our thoughts too much on like, I want to be able to do the soda shot, or I want my leg to be high, so I must need to stretch, instead of my full body needs to be able to participate in this activity. So strength is where, if you're doing nothing else outside of the studio, that's what I would start with. Moving heavy objects well. And that's something that I kind of specialize in with dancers. Dancing multiple times a week is going to be helpful. So don't start all at once, but build yourself into it. That's why I kind of give that 6 month mark. It also leaves time for, you get sick, babysitter cancels, things happen. Like, it's the way it goes. It totally goes that way. So we're leaving ourselves enough time to get all those dancing hours in without having a crazy spike in our activity. Half work is something I hear most adult dancers say was a shock when they got into their first summer intensive, or intensive where they were dancing days in a row. So being able to do about 30 single leg calf raises every day, I think is a light must. Like if you're thinking like, how can I assess myself? I think you should be able to do 30 single leg calf raises without problems in your joints or Achilles. And it can be hard, but that would be something that you could start building up before you get into your summer intensive. And I think your calves and feet will really thank you for that. Endurance is something we talked about. So just being able to have those days where you can go walking, swimming, dancing, all the things. You can be tired, but like you should be able to get through a day of extra, but kind of normal people activities. Yeah, you don't have to be in the studio the whole time, but you should be able to get through that stuff. So starting to build that up, your endurance for life of athletic endeavors would be a really nice way to prepare yourself for a summer intensive. I also always want to say that I think a lot of the time we are last case, like I'm on the clock. Now I'm going to get everything in that I possibly should have gotten in the last 6 months in these 2 weeks. I've been there and done that multiple times in many ways, but the month before you go into an intensive is not the time to decide I'm going to take all the classes, I'm going to spike my load. Like you have to know that 1 month before is about as good as it's going to get for you in this moment. I say that with all the love and compassion in the world for myself and for your body. And it's okay to go into this intensive without feeling like you're in your peak condition. I have never worked with a summer intensive that they were like, oh, you should have been more prepared for this. I've never heard or seen any teacher say that in the adult world. So learning how to gauge how you're doing and modify, and those are all things that we could talk about. But the month before, that's kind of where we're at, and we're going to maintain that as we go through to it, and we're not going to start new things. So this is not the time to start a weightlifting regimen or to like decide to do Pilates for the first time or jump into something like that. Stick with what you know at this point, and then look at your next year and say, hey, next year I'd really like to X, Y, or Z, and I'm going to try this Pilates thing, or I'm going to try this cycling thing, or whatever it is. But I would stick with that 1 month line.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing that obviously would be the worst case scenario is that you injure yourself because of overuse, overdoing it in the lead up to an intensive, and then you don't get to participate at all, or even as much as you could have if you would have just maintained doing the same thing. And think, like you said, one of the things that I have also experienced is that there is so much room for modification, and there's so much grace at adult intensives for doing what you need to do to take care of your body. And if that means that you have to sit out of class and watch, or you have to modify the exercises, I've never seen that be a problem, like you said. So I think also keeping that in mind, that it's better to go in with that mentality of like, if I need to modify, I will. If I need to hold back, I will, versus I have to get in the best shape of my life in the next month and then injuring yourself and not being able to enjoy it at all. I would be curious to hear from you if there's things that you recommend that adults can be doing to self-assess a little bit more. Again, not in that month leading up necessarily, but as you're thinking for next year's intensives, or if you're going to one in the fall, like, are there certain ways that adults can take in what they're currently doing, what their body feels like, and determine, okay, here's probably for me what would be a good thing for me to be working on, whether that's, like you said, calf strength, or just questions that they can be asking themselves?
I think that one of the biggest things is, what is stopping you from finishing the class the way you want to? Is it your endurance? Is it a certain area in your body that, like your calves start cramping by the time you get to adagio? Is if it's something hurts? What is it that is stopping you from finishing the class? Or what do you want to be better at by the time you finish that class? Like you're like, God, I always hate adagio, so that must mean that maybe getting my legs in the air is not my favorite thing because it's harder for me. If you can take that thing and then take it out of the studio, I think we're going to be more successful. And that's a really clear way for you to say, this is how my body is feeling. This is where I need to go next. Because as many corrections as you get from a teacher, they're not in your body. They don't know how it feels. You could look stunning and be in pain. You could be like, this feels wrong. I feel like my left pinky toe is gripping to hold my leg up above my head. Like, they have no idea. And I have made the mistake of in training people in saying, oh, good, that movement's right. And then you can kind of see them look at you like, really? And it's like, oh, it doesn't feel good to you. I don't want to say that ballet feels good that every movement feels fantastic. Let's be real. Ballet is really hard, maybe the hardest thing, but there shouldn't be pain in joints. There shouldn't be specific stabbing, pinpointed feelings. It should be hard effort and work in large areas. So if you're getting corrections from your teachers, they are super valuable. But what is holding you back from finishing your class might be more valuable in the next step of going. Because I think every adult dancer I've worked with can pinpoint not only what the teacher says, but what's hard for them. Like, oh, the teacher always tells me to push my shoulders down. But you know what's really hard? It's for me to stand on one leg and to keep my shoulders down and to keep my ankle from rocking. And then they always have something that they realize they should be stronger at, So we know our bodies. Go off of that. You don't have to have that specific teacher instruction, although valuable. You don't have to have that. I kind of touched on this, but do my joints hurt is a very important gauge for us. Work is in broad muscle area. So like your whole quad, my whole glute, my whole calf, that's work. Pain, most of the time in the general dance population, is in a joint. So like the knees bother you, your ankles feel weird, the hips feel pitchy, grippy, achy, stabby, my low back bothers. Most of the time that's where it gathers. And then sometimes there's a very specific, like you could point right to it. You're like, this spot on my shoulder hurts. This spot in my back hurts, and it's on a muscle. So if you're feeling those are signs that there is a weakness in the chain. It's not necessarily the area, it's the things around it. So you can do a little self-assessment and say like, okay, if my hip is hurting, maybe my glute or my core needs to be stronger, and maybe my quad needs to be stronger. And you do not have to self-diagnose, but you can use the awareness of then making your next decision. What am I going to do? And I think that we need to use that more and be willing to reach out and know when it's time to ask for help. So I would say the last quick one would be thinking of your class again. Like, do I have the energy to make it through the class? But like, how does my week go? I mean, I know work is rough sometimes, and a lot of us would rather be dancing than doing some of our life things. But your nutrition, your sleep, your recovery, these are all things that add up and will make a big difference in your intensive experience. And that can't be changed 2 weeks before. Little things will help. Like if you're hydrated, you're going to feel a little better going into the workshop, and that can be 3 days before, really being good about that. But overall, this is that 6-month mark. If we're being honest, this is that time where we start to think ahead to a goal. And I think a lot of us are very goal oriented if we're in this art form and we like it. And when you have a goal that you like and want to work for, I always find it easier to make some of these lifestyle changes. Because I'm like, I don't want my calf to cramp when I'm at the intensive, or I died on day 3 last year and it was my energy level. I didn't have it in me. So we can start making some of those predictions and decisions to assist your body to be ready for the next thing that's coming.
Yeah, and I love the emphasis that you put on, your body. So one of the best things you can be doing to prepare is really consciously thinking about how your body feels. Because I think sometimes, especially if you did ballet as a child, we're almost encouraged as dancers to rely on our teachers to tell us.
Absolutely. There is no thinking in ballet. Up until now, there's not room in ballet for people to have opinions.
Yeah, it's
That
like
is not the culture.
you're waiting for your teacher. You're like, I don't know how I feel. Like, tell me how it looked. I don't think that's one of the things I've really been learning the last few years is just to think more consciously about how I actually feel, which sounds so crazy that you even have to think like that. But I think a lot of times, even as adults, even if it's not because of being raised in a dance environment, it's just because out of the busyness of survival mode, we're kind of trained to just like push past, how we feel. Yeah, you're just like, oh, it hurts, but whatever. Like, I have 25 things I have to do today, so I can't dwell on that. But I think in preparation for something like an intensive, being really intentional about thinking through how your body feels and noticing as you're in class. Like, I can't tell you how many times it's been a delayed thing for me to realize that something is hurting me. I know that sounds weird. And it's like, oh, I'll register like, oh, that feels weird. But it's like, I don't actually think about it and think, oh, your hip has been bothering you for the last 5 classes. It's like all of a sudden that dawns on you and you're like, oh, yeah, I should probably think about what I need to adjust to deal with that. And so I think that's a really good reminder for adults to really, in the months leading up to an intensive, start really thinking through like how you actually feel in class and addressing those issues. Because that's not something that we're always good at as dancers and as adults.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that I want dancers to feel like I want them to know that they have the knowledge to take care of themselves. They have the autonomy of their body to say yes and no, this doesn't feel good. I'm not going to do this today because, like you said, if you grew up in the dance world when you were younger or, into the 90s and before, you just did. There was no question, and it didn't matter if it doesn't feel good. So there's that aspect of it, and I think we can do more with that than we realize, especially as novice. Sometimes we're like, "Well, I don't know," and I'm like, "You actually do. Like, you may not know why. You don't have to know the technical name of things. You do not have to know how to fix something, but you know your body. You know how it feels." And even if you can't tell me or someone else exactly what's happening in your body, if you take the time to try to describe it, you'll nail it on the head. And that is a big thing I do with the dancers I work with privately and also online is I don't accept the words fine, good, okay, because they don't tell me anything. I can't help you with that.
Yeah.
I wanna know what you're feeling. So in my mind, I can say to you as the professional, this is what we're going for, or we need to change the exercise or our approach so that you feel it in a different spot. Practice speaking what's happening in your body, and then you will be able to find answers because of that.
And that actually leads into the next thing I wanted to ask you about is just, let's say that we are in that month prior to an intensive. What role should rest be playing in our prep? Because I think a lot of times, like we talked about earlier, the tendency is to want to push more and do more training, but really we also need to be resting, but in what quantities, I think is something that people maybe would struggle with. Like every summer for the last few years I've done an intensive, I'm always like, do I give myself 3 days off before the intensive, or is that too much? Because then I'm going to get to my first class and feel stiff. It's like this game that we're always playing, which again, I know is individualistic in some senses, but is there kind of a general rule that you would say to people of like, here's how much you should be resting in the lead up?
Yeah, I can give some general guidelines, and then I would say that this is why you also kind of get that lead up time to experiment. You get to see, how do I feel after I take 3 days off? Like, am I wrecked after that first class back, or do I do good? And like, I don't want you to push out like to weeks of not dancing, but like, I don't know, is 4 days perfect for you? It might be. So in general, I would re-emphasize that the month before is not the time to make changes. So whatever your capacity load is at 3 to 4 weeks before your event, that's kind of it. That's where we're stopping, and we're gonna kind of hang out there / start to pull back on things just a little bit so that you're not overcooked when it comes time for your intensive. There are a lot of studies that show when we have a load spike, so that load means activity, where that can be anything, but for dancers, it's going to be mostly time in the studio, or they start to do some other type of conditioning like Pilates, yoga, weight training, something. When your spike goes too fast, too hard, it is very highly predictable that in 3 weeks of that spike happening, you will have an injury. Pretty much across the athletic board, they can predict that with a certain amount of spike in activity, in 3 weeks, there will be an injury. So take that as that's not the time to keep adding, and that's actually the time to level off and to start to taper off a little bit. So I would say that the week before the intensive, I would be pretty light in my schedule. Again, you're not making changes. So I always say to the young kids that I work with who do the ballet competitions and the jazz competition, the week before, the 2 weeks before, we're not making changes in how you're dancing. This is like confidence on stage. So this is you feeling good in the studio. If you haven't changed it by then, it's not going to change in that week leading up to. So just forgive yourself for not being as good as your expectation, because it's only your expectation. Nobody else in that intensive is thinking, gosh, maybe you should have been more prepared. Nobody is thinking that. It is only you. So brush that one off and keep your schedule lighter the week before an intensive. And I would suggest trying 2 to 3 days off before you get to your intensive. That's me, give or take. Maybe you said maybe 3 days was too much for you to be off. Or maybe it's 2 days with like a light bar or a really good workout and mobility session. So you feel a little like juiced up and lubricated, something like that. But you don't want to be going hard before you go into a week, 3 days of intense dance. In general, I think that at the height of activity, so if you're a very active person, we want to be having 2 days a week that we are pretty much doing no physical activity. Light walk sounds great, like a really easy mobility session, but it's not to change your flexibility. It's just to feel good, like 10 minutes, really, really light. And then you're going to take those 2 to 3 days off right before your intensive, doing things that just feel good for your body if needed when you're doing it. But those are very generic guidelines, and it really is going to come down to your personal buildup.
No, I think that's really helpful. Even keeping it general, I still think the advice to do other types of movement that make you feel good. 'Cause I'm thinking of even people who travel to go to an intensive. Maybe they take a plane, they do a really long road trip, and if you get there the day before, you maybe don't want to take a full class because you want to be rested for the next day, but doing something to move your body.
Totally.
So that you're just
And that's a
getting
big factor. That's totally something that I didn't even consider is those of us that are traveling for something. You want to do something after that travel that makes you feel good and refreshed, not challenged, because you're going to spend a week doing that challenging thing. So
I want to move into the week of an actual intensive or the few days of an intensive. I know they kind of vary in length from 3 days, 5 days, but just focusing on how we can care for our bodies during the week that we're actually there. So, do you have any tips for adult dancers for setting their bodies up for success the morning of? Like, you wake up, usually classes, the one I've been to have, they start around 10, 11, whatever that is. You wake up in the morning. What are some ways that we can get our bodies ready for what's coming the rest of the day?
good question. Everybody's a little individual. That also seems to be my theme and disclaimer of this episode. Everyone, you're welcome. But I feel that waking up and not rushing to the studio is a big part of preparing yourself mentally for the day. So even though you want to get as much rest as possible, and for a lot of us, this is like our vacation, right? You're working so hard, but all for your vacation. You're away from your family. Hopefully you're getting good sleep at night uninterrupted, but wake up with enough time to leisurely hang around, enjoy your cup of coffee where you're at, have a very good breakfast, and not feel rushed to the studio. Then leave enough time to warm up, not stretch out. It is a warm up. So I talked about stretching. We don't need to go back into that, but this is your time to warm up, not stretch it out. And it's very tempting, especially when you're tired, I know, to get into the studio and sit down on the floor with your legs out on the side and be like, why am I here? Slash, I can't believe I'm here. This is the best thing on the planet. I get it. I can remember training and professional life where I would roll in, I'd get off the bus, I'd roll into the studio and lay on my back like I made it. And I was still happy to be there, but I was exhausted and I would not properly warm my body up. So start planning for 20 minutes in the studio or right before you get in your car to drive somewhere to warm your body up. And if you don't know how to do that, you can come check out some of my stuff and we'll help you figure that out. But that will be the biggest thing you can do for your day to feel better for the day. Build it into your schedule and build it into your mind commitment of the day. Because I know you're thinking, okay, I dance from 10 to 4. That's a lot of hours. It is a lot of hours. But now you're dancing from 9:40 to 4 because you're going to build it into that mental little cocoon that you have for what is expected of your body. There's other things I think that will assist in general, which would be your pacing. So look at the day schedule. You know your body, what is going to be challenging for you and what's important to you. If you know that there is a teacher that you are really wanting to go full for, you really are excited to work with them. Either you know what they're going to ask for, like they're very jumpy, or you know that they do a lot of phrases and releves. So you might decide to kind of hold back in other classes and not do as many releves or not jump the second time or, only do some of the jumps depending on totally where you're at. But look ahead each day and if it's a consideration for you, decide what the important class or teacher of that day is for you and try to make your best judgment call of what you need to do to participate fully, but not fully go out full out in your body. One thing that I love and I wish as a young dancer I understood better. I think I got this as I got into my 20s right before I stopped dancing, but kids and adults, I know for adults they tend to feel like, well, I can't do all the petit allegro. And it can feel a little like a self beat up, like, oh, I'm not getting everything that I can out of this class because I'm not physically in the center going on the beat doing the petit allegro. But I promise you that if you mark your port de bras full out and you do the direction of class, changing corner to corner, glissade, whatever, if you do that and mark fully in the back of the class, you will get so much out of class. The only thing you're not getting is the physicality of jumping, but you're taking in what needs to be happening in your body. You're working on timing. You're hearing the corrections. You're working on your presence. You're even thinking of like what it's like to go up and down during the petit allegro. You're just getting so much. So if you end up being in a spot where you don't feel that you can fully physically participate in class, if you're good to stand or sit, fully mark that port de bras gigantic and change your direction. And I swear to you, you'll walk out feeling like you fully participated because you did. You were fully engaged in what was happening. There was not a moment where you were checked out and like not there. So you can do that to help gauge and pace your class. Little things that will make a difference too, of course, will be snacking in between every class. Like bring a suitcase full of snacks. If you can't make it to the grocery store, fly with all your favorite snacks. And you need to be eating a lot more than you do during your general day. I hear a lot of adult dancers say, well, I've got stuff to burn, like we're joking about our waistline, but no, you don't, because you're going to be burning muscle. So we need to replenish that. You kind of have to let go of your ego as you are doing such an athletic endeavor. And you have to feel like an athlete. And that means lots of calories and variety of food. So in between every single class, you're taking snacks to help keep your blood sugar level and to also help your muscles. And I'll say lastly, with your water intake, kind of goes unsaid, lots of water. But you also want to start balancing out with some like minerals. Salt is really important. You can drink too much water and your mineral balance, your electrolyte balance will throw your body off from like not balancing water intake with electrolytes. So bring something that float your boat in that way. Find a good electrolyte drink or just eat some salty food. So that's going to help too. So those are important aspects to keep your day going.
Yeah, no, that's all really, really good information. I feel like too with the pacing part of what you said, that's just such an important way to approach each day. Like I remember by the time I came back the second year for an intensive, the first year I was like flying by the seat of my pants. The second year I came back, I was like, okay, we're gonna do this smarter this year. And the thing that I have started doing for intensives is, in addition to, yes, getting there early, warming up, super important, but also thinking of that first class of the day as an extension of that warm up and staying in warm up mode for that class, not, like you said, full out mode. Like this class is to get my body ready for the rest of the day. This is not the main event. So not starting with the first class of the day being like, oh, I'm going to do everything on releve. I'm going to do full out, as high as my leg can go. Like thinking of that first class as this is chill mode. This is just waking up the body. And for me at least, I feel like that really helped sustain the longevity of the week. Like the last year that I did an intensive as opposed to the first year, I felt much better on the last day than I did my first intensive. The first year I went, I was cooked by like the third day. I was like, I don't even know if I'm able to finish out the week. And then the next year, going a little slower in the day. And, there's times where the teacher will say, like, if you want to do this on releve, go for it. And I'm like, nope, I'm not going to do it on releve. Like, I choose in my adult autonomy to not do that on releve. And I think that they seem like little micro decisions, but they really add up for the overall pacing of your whole week if you are smart with the choices that you're making at the beginning of the week and in your first class of the day, and you're holding back a little bit. And I know we get excited, I think, as adults because we're just like, this is the best thing ever to be an intensive, and you want to dance really well and have a lot of fun. And it's like not to squash that, but I think when you think about it in terms of like, oh no, I have 3 more classes after this. This bar class is
times 5.
Yeah, times 5. Like I can afford to pull back a little bit in this first bar class of the day. So I
love that idea. And that's such a good thing to remember.
For most of us, it's like an intensive is a marathon. You have to think about it
Sure.
in those terms.
Intensive is a marathon for those young little Instagram 14-year-old dancers. Like the amount of injuries that happen during summer intensive to young dancers is extremely high. And they are younger, dance longer, have more training, like they have all the things, and they are still running a marathon in these studios. So of course we're doing like the ultra marathon or whatever the 100-miler is. That's what a 5-day intensive.
Yeah, I know.
Or like Ironman.
Like I trained all year for this.
Yeah.
This is my Olympics. That's so funny. That actually brings up a good point, though, that I wanted to ask you about. During the week, it's very normal to be very sore. And there is, a portion of that is to be expected and is fine. But I think where it can get hard for adults is differentiating between what is kind of normal to be expected soreness that you can push through versus this is potentially about to be an injury and I need to pull back. So are there things that adults can be looking for that would help them to know, okay, I should probably go sit down versus it's okay, I can keep going?
Soreness is a broadness. We kind of talked about this earlier. It's a broad feeling in a big area. So the quad, like the whole top of your thigh, versus a very small pinpointed up at the top of the quad. Or your whole calf, like my whole calf is burning, versus a spot down below near the Achilles or the heel. So soreness is going to be the broad. Pain tends to be more pinpointed. People tend to describe it as stabbing, aching, numbness, pins and needles, tenderness, jabbing. So if you're using words like that to describe, then it's probably more towards pain. And like I said before, a lot of pain is in joints. So it means ankles, hips. So we're looking at those spots was where I would gamble that somebody is going to feel pain. Another thing to think about is, does movement make it better? So You get there in the morning, you want to lay on the ground, but Allie said, don't do that and move through it, get warmed up. And by the time you get through about halfway through that first class, you realize, like, oh, I feel a lot better. Maybe it doesn't completely go away, but you feel like you can move again and it's going to be okay. That's soreness. If the pain keeps getting worse, if the quote soreness that you're not sure is pain keeps getting worse, then and it just keeps escalating as you move or during class, that would definitely be a time to step back and say, okay, do I need to modify? Do I need to sit down? Do I just need to rest it for this class? But the escalation of it should not be happening once you start moving if it's true soreness. I think just the big thing is that movement makes it feel better. And soreness, it's hard in a workshop because you're going so many days in a row. But in general, for your education of how your body feels, general soreness will go away within 48 to 72 hours. So if something's lasting longer than that or repetitively coming back, it's probably edging towards weakness, which then turns into an injury. I think in intensives, I see warning signs of dancers like shaking. Either like their blood sugar levels dropped or their effort level is just so high or they're in pain and they don't want to stop. So we'll see more than the like, I'm holding my leg at 90 degrees and holy crap, this is really hard. But it's like your body feels like jelly that can't support you. If you really feel that way, that's not the best time to be pushing through class. That would be a time to modify. And then if you really feel like you can't stand up, like please sit down, get some water, have some food, that type of thing. But you might get to the point at the end of a day or towards the middle of the week where you just feel like you're jelly. And that's a really dangerous time because you're not in control of your body. That would not be the best time to start working on fast feet Allegro when you don't feel like you're in control. It's not the best time to go on point, so on and so forth. So you can kind of use that as a gauge also.
That's all very helpful because I think, like you said, when there's that noticeable loss of stability where you're so fatigued, where you're like, I don't even feel like I can really stand well right now, that's not the time to be doing Grand Allegro or Petit Allegro. And I think just keeping that in mind. I think also, too, it's so helpful the information that you just gave about soreness being in a broader area versus like pinpointed pain. Because I think oftentimes we just need a really practical, specific piece of information like that to be able to ask ourselves the right question. Because I think going back to what we talked about earlier, I think as dancers, we can kind of justify pushing through a lot of times. And we're like, oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. But I think that is like a really great question to be able to just ask yourself, is it the whole area or am I feeling a specific point at which there is strong discomfort? And that's a really helpful. I mean, that's something that I'm like, oh, I need to be incorporating that into my body feedback checklist when I'm experiencing something and trying to figure out what it is and how I should adjust accordingly. So it's super helpful.
Totally. And I also want to, I feel like I say this a lot, but I think it's really, really important. Pain is part of our lives. I wish I could say for everyone that you're never going to be in pain, but pain is not a bad thing when we take care of it. It is the only way your body can tell you something's not right. Like your appendix is not doing well. It hurts. Like it is a signal that something is going wrong. Aches and pains that we get in our body, in our knees, in your Achilles and your low back, it is information. And the frustrating part for most of us is we don't know what to do with it. But when you start to recognize the pattern, and this is when you reach out to people, you go to the PT you trust, you have the trainer you trust, you have your team of people. But those painful moments are telling you that there is most likely a weakness in the chain. And we got to take care of it. So when things start coming back over and over, it's not that you're broken. It's not broken. It's kink in the chain. And the kink in the chain can be fixed. Know that with strength and building of strength, building of muscle in the correct way, a lot of those things go away. So use pain as the information. Don't be afraid of it, but don't ignore it. And when it happens, have the people in your corner, start developing the people in your corner to assist you. And you'll still have those moments, that they will get farther and farther between, and they will become less scary and less severe because you take care of them as they're happening, not 40 years with the bad knees or back or whatever we've been, kind of dealing with.
It's so good and so true, and equating that to my own experience when my back went out, which and I was thinking about this even before we jumped on to record. It's just so cool now when I look back. I mean, at the time, throwing my back out was completely uncool and terrible. I hated it. But now I was just thinking about this, like, I don't really have pain in my low back at all anymore. And that was something that I had just accepted and was living with until my back went completely out and I had to deal with it. And now it's like in this weird way, even though it was terrible, I'm so grateful that my body told me and made me address things that I just wasn't addressing. And now it's like I know that I'm stronger, I'm healthier, my body is in a better place because I had to deal with things that I was just pushing through. Like I just had like low grade discomfort in my low back all the time. It was just like, "Oh, okay, that's just how it is." And it's like, to your point, it doesn't have to be that way. You can get to a place where the things that are bothering you and hurt and are weaknesses in your body, like you really can get to a place where those aren't issues anymore. You just have to listen and, don't do what I did and wait until you throw your back out to listen. If I had listened when it was just a little bit of discomfort, but I'm still so glad that like our bodies are just amazing and what they're capable of overcoming and healing and fixing. And like you said, it's like you don't have to think about it as being broken or, oh, I can't. This is just something I have to live with. Oh, you probably don't. You probably can get better. You just have to attack it, with people that know what they're doing and really get that feedback.
Yeah.
So moving into after the intensive, obviously during the week of intensive, we are getting a lot of information, feedback from our bodies. Hopefully, like we talked about earlier, we've been being very mindful about noticing the things that maybe hurt or even that are just more difficult than we would like them to be. So I would love to just hear your thoughts on how to use that feedback when we get home and what that can look like for adults.
I think my one and best advice from experience is whatever corrections you're trying to fix, don't just try to fix them in the studio. Take it outside of the studio and work on it in the cross-training mentality. I mean, I guess you would expect me to say that because that's what I do, but I do what I do because of experiences that didn't work and that did work. And the dancers I work with, no matter the age, no matter the level, when they start, the ones that take the correction, like shoulders down, and then strengthen and understand in their body what needs to happen and what it feels like to have shoulders down from a approach of activation and strength, do so much better and excel so much faster than the dancer that's just going into the studio every week going shoulders down, shoulders down, shoulders down. So my suggestion, as adults, we understand that there is more to our body than what we're asking it to do in ballet. And you will serve your technique better by trying to figure out what you need to do outside of the studio to strengthen the body as a human to be the artist and dancer in the studio.
Yeah. No, it's so good because I think a lot of times, like we've talked about, like you need to have other people that are speaking into the feedback that you're getting, the corrections you're getting, because like I know for me, I tend to stick out my butt, have the duck butt. That's like my natural, comfortable standing position. And I think before working with you, I was always just thinking of tucking my butt under to fix that. But then once you had me really start working on core work when I was having all the issues with my back and stuff, and I was like, oh, and maybe, that's on me, but it's like, I think a lot of people probably wouldn't have thought, oh, what I need to be working on is my core and I need to be addressing my core. And like you said, it's things that I wouldn't be spending time on inside of class. Like I needed to be doing a completely different type of exercise to really build core strength versus just every time I'm in class thinking, don't tuck my butt, don't tuck my butt, don't tuck my butt, And so I think for adults, if you can at least be really mindful of the corrections you're getting during the week, writing them down, making note of the ones you're hearing over and over and over, and then working with someone like you who can translate that into here's what you can be doing to specifically address those things. That's such a great residual benefit of going to a summer intensive, I think, is you're getting such a concentrated amount of feedback in that week. Like I remember the first one I went to, that was like the feedback I kept getting. Every teacher, every class was about my alignment. So got home and was like, okay, that's something I need to figure out how to work on. Yeah, I think that's such a great, if you almost go into the intensive thinking that like this is going to be a time where I'm going to get a lot of feedback on how I can improve. And then when I go home, partnering with someone like you who can take that and put it into more of a holistic program versus just going into class and trying to work those things out in a class setting.
Yeah. Understanding what you are trying to accomplish and how to do it, not just put your shoulders down or tuck your butt under, because that is a nondescript action. It's what you see, not what is happening.
Yeah, so good. And I would love for you to share about your platform before we finish up, just because I think it is such a great resource for all the things we've been talking about, even with getting your warm-up routine really dialed in. Like there's so many amazing exercises that are on your platform that are a great exercise to incorporate in your warm-up routine for any class, but especially for an intensive. So if you could share more about your platform, that would be awesome.
Happy to, and I'm always happy to hear when people feel it's valuable. I put together an online platform, Dancer Strong Programs, and it's for dancers to use current sports evidence and dance knowledge together. I just did some numbers, and I've had 3,000 dancers go through my online programs. I see the commonalities, and that's what you're going to find in the Dancer Strong platform are what exercises do the most dancers need, and I try to create things with that in mind. So I think there's a no duck butt workout, and it's things that assist you to realign and strengthen in that posture based off of how you feel, not what you see in the mirror. So much of what I want to give to the dance world is empowering you to know what you're trying to accomplish.
One of the things too I love that you've been doing more recently for people who are part of your platform is the live group classes, which are great. Because I know some people, if you're just starting to get into strength training, you might be intimidated by the thought of doing something without live feedback. And so I think that's such a great resource that's being offered in tandem with the program is you can jump into the live group classes and get to go through some of the exercises with you there, giving feedback, and that can really empower you for doing more on your own because you're getting the feedback on your specific alignment. And so those have been a really fun resource too. I do your Monday class, and I love it as like a setup for the week.
Totally. And anything that empowers your brain to be like, I can do this.
Do you want to really quickly tell people the exact addresses of where they can connect with you? I'm going to put it in the show notes as well, but just so people can also hear it.
It's dancerstrongprograms.com. And you can find me on Instagram and YouTube at Align Fitness by Allie. Come tell me you heard me here and ask me your questions.
Yeah, definitely connect with Allie if you have questions about the program, if you're wanting even individual feedback, because are you taking clients right now, like on an individual basis?
I do evaluation. So if you're wanting a little bit of information about where you're at, how to move forward, sometimes people will come and do a virtual or in-person evaluation, and then I can give better recommendations if you want to use the online platform, which is a really nice mix of both. Like, let's figure out what you could focus on, send you on your way, and then you can use the platform.
So thank you so much for coming on. I feel like this was so full of practical information to set people up for success with their intensives. And we're so grateful for your time. So thank you.
Thank you, Hannah.
It's always a pleasure. We will catch you guys on the next episode. Bye.
Thank you for listening to After Class.
Join the community on YouTube and Instagram, or come dance with us, our weekly Zoom classes for adult ballerinas like you.
Links included in the episode description. Special thank you to our sponsors.
See you next time after class. Podcast produced by Mission Bridge Media.